And that's what you're really paying your attorneys to do, is tell you like, hey, look out for this because this might be a problem, and say, okay, if that's a problem, how big of a problem? And then we have to weigh, okay, if a problem is that big, how likely is it to happen?
Yeah.
And then how much do I care? I was telling Joe about some of the challenges that we had while I was at NRI, and we were actually talking about how some of the nights, like I would just stay up working, right? Because we had so many things going on during the day, and we had a small team, but we had $600 million worth of construction going on. And I was the one in the office that had the legal background, right? And our CEO needed to be doing other things. So he wasn't reading the full length of the contract immediately when it came through, but he was relying on me and some of our attorneys to get the stuff done, and within a short period of time, right? So we would have committed to a bank that we were going to get back to them, or a tenant or whoever. And rather than waiting, like a lot of people do, you send out a contract, you wait for the attorney to mark it up, and then you give them your comments, and then you send it back to them. And depending on what everybody's schedule is, that could be 2 days, or it could be 5 days, or it could be 2 weeks. And what we would do instead was we would just say, okay, this thing has to be done. And 2 attorneys and me, we would get on the phone from 8 p.m. till 1 a.m. and like we would just go through the contract like line by line together, because I had to make business decisions. They were giving me the legal input. And for me, that was like the best legal training that I could have possibly gotten, and business training, because we had top tier legal teams. And so I was working with the best of the best at Greenberg Traurig, and we had a woman named Kathy who was out of Minnesota that we were working with, and she's amazing also. And they would be telling me, and they knew that I was, at the very beginning, I was inexperienced and didn't know like what all of the potential problems were. And that's what you're really paying your attorneys to do, is tell you like, hey, look out for this because this might be a problem, and say, okay, if that's a problem, how big of a problem? And then we have to weigh, okay, if a problem is that big, how likely is it to happen?
Yeah.
And then how much do I care?
Yeah.
And so it would take all 3 of us, a lot of times, all 3 of us going through these things, because they could get a decision right there on the spot from a business person that would say, no, do it that way. And then sometimes we would have stuff left over for the morning, and I could go into my boss and tell him like, hey, here are the 5 things we need your decision on. And then we could get those decisions back to the attorney, and we'd be done in 1 day instead of 2 weeks. And so it's way more efficient if you're willing to put in the effort. But that is one of the things that you can have a lot of back and forth because you're relying on these other people. But if everybody on the team is in it together, and you know what it takes, and you know what you're trying to achieve, you can get it done much faster.
Okay. And what would you say will be your ideal, in terms of skills, what would be your ideal development team? If you had to choose 5 people, each person has on, let's say, as like a specialty.
Obviously, legal comes first to mind because that's what we're already talking about. And because you have your architecture agreements, your general contract, like all the land use stuff, there are tons of legal issues that come up. The other one, you have to have an analyst. That's why Joe was the first person I hired, because I needed someone that understood numbers, that understood finance, and could actually run the pro forma and do the work that everybody is expecting to see. Okay. Because those are deliverables that you have to provide to banks, to partners, et cetera. I would also have someone that was good at capital raising and structuring finance. Mm-hmm. So someone on the capital side of things in general, at a higher level. So you have the lower level employee that handles actually doing the work. And then you have someone that understands the structure and how to communicate with the investors and how to communicate with the bank and what your options are, and putting those things together. So that's 3. Definitely a construction person. So construction/design is a skill that's necessary for you to really see what it is that is going to be, how is it going to be built? What are all the ins and outs of the contract? So all these things, of course, like work together. Like you have to have these things working in tandem. And then the last one, the fifth one, I would say would either be operations or sales. So that depends on the type of development work that you're doing. If you're doing a for sale product, you don't need an operations person, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not operating anything ideally. Yeah. And if you have someone who's on your sales team, that could be acquisitions, dispositions. It could be actually a sales agent, but someone who has like that brokerage type of mindset, skill set, and network that they can tap into to get the deals done.
The energetic one in the bunch, like the explosive one.
Most likely.
Yeah. So that's the big five. That's the back-to-back champions. Okay, that's perfect. And so the ideal is to have all those five skills to build like the ideal development team. And would you say, humbly, what would you say would be your, like, out of the five skills, how many do you have, humbly speaking?
So humbly speaking, I would say the legal is my kind of my go-to.
Yeah.
I think that I know enough about all of them, though, that it makes me effective in terms of being able to have the conversations with people about whatever the issues are that come up. And so as we're not, although we have a brokerage team, we're not hiring our brokerage team to do the sales of the units that we're working on in Delray right now, because they're not the perfect team for that. I'm not going to go create a general contracting company right now because there's an expert team that we're working with in that market. But if I didn't know enough to work out a contract with them, I'm going to be just shooting in the dark and having a really tough time actually delivering on what it is I'm trying to accomplish and what's right for the investors. And people see through that. That's how a lot of people get stuck and they can't get financing, because the bank is oftentimes the one that like catches people who pretend to know things that they don't know. But that's why you need to have a well-regulated financial industry.
You have discipline because of your law backgrounds. Mm-hmm. Lawyers need to be disciplined to read 120 pages of a contract, for example. You have the organizational skills back from your past job because you were managing over $600 million of development projects.
I think that the organizational skills is inherent to me and like how I think and am.
That's lucky.
Well, yeah. Just people have different ways of like their mind works. And going back to my dad, he loves Starbucks, right? Like absolutely. Yeah. That was our go-to place. Mm-hmm. And we would just be sitting there. Other than the stories I was telling about the truck, right? As I got older, he was doing more consulting work. And so he would be consulting or like putting deals together instead of like messing around with a compressor on a well. And we would be sitting there and he'd be diagramming out like org charts the way that I do in the office with the everything. So I just always saw org charts, and I would see like org charts and flow charts and if this, then that, pro-con lists and things like that. I think his mind works that way, and I think that I was born.
Were you exposed to that?
I was born with it, and then exposed to it like every day.
I feel like if I go to your house, I will find a drawer that will find printed out receipts, 2008, 2009, 2010, everything. I feel you keep all your finances in order as well.
Yeah,
since decades ago.
Yeah. It's true. I actually have, and I have all of my old school stuff in my folders, like on my computer. Yeah, I have everything very well organized.
Jared GPT, that's what I'm going to call you, Jared.
Yeah.